The first note drifted into Thornwick Hollow on a damp autumn evening, carried by a wind that smelled of wet earth and pine. It wasn't loud, just a single, shivering hum, like a bow drawn across a string of glass, but it rooted every villager where they stood. Leta Marrow, grinding herbs in her crooked cottage at the edge of town, didn't hear it. She hadn't heard anything in 27 years, not since the fever took her ears as a child. But she felt it, a vibration in her chest, sharp and insistent, like a heartbeat not her own. She glanced out her window, mortar still in hand, and saw the villagers swaying in the dusk, their faces slack, eyes glassy. At the center of the square stood a stranger, tall and gaunt, his coat tattered at the hems. In his hands was an instrument unlike any Leta had seen, a lattice of polished bones, pale as moonlight, strung with sinew that gleamed wetly. He drew a bow across it, and the air trembled. By morning, Old Man Harrow was gone. They found him 3 days later, slumped against an oak in the black pine forest, alive but silent. His gnarled hands hung limp, his jaw slack, and when Leta pressed her fingers to his wrist, she felt his pulse stutter in a rhythm that didn't match her own. The village healer, Mara, muttered about curses, but Leta noticed something stranger. Harrow's shoulders sat unevenly, his spine curved in a way it hadn't before. His bones had shifted, subtle but wrong, like a puzzle reassembled by unsteady hands. The musician stayed. He called himself Elias, his voice a low rasp that Leta read from his lips as he spoke to the tavern keeper. He'd come from the east, he said, a wanderer with no home, offering music to ease weary souls. The villagers welcomed him, entranced by the Bone Orchestra's melodies, haunting, yes, but alive with a pull they couldn't name. Each night, Elias played in the square, the notes curling through the hollow like smoke. And each night, someone vanished. First Harrow, then young Tilda from the bakery, then the miller's son, Jem. Always the same, gone at dusk, found days later in the forest, mute and rearranged. The village whispered of witchcraft, of spirits, but Leta saw no magic in their eyes, only fear and a strange, hollow peace. She watched from her window, immune to the sound that snared the others. Her deafness, once a burden in a town that thrived on gossip and song, was now her shield. She studied Elias, noting the way his hands shook as he played, the sweat beading on his brow even in the chill. He didn't revel in the music, he endured it. On the 5th night, as he drew the bow and Widow Crane drifted toward the forest's edge, Leta slipped out, her satchel heavy with herbs and a knife she'd sharpened that morning. She followed the widow's path, the vibration in her chest guiding her where sound could not. The black pine forest loomed dense and ancient, its trees gnarled and black with sap. Leta found Crane crumpled beneath a pine, her eyes open but unseeing, her fingers bent at angles that made Leta's stomach turn. She knelt, pressing a hand to Crane's ribs. The bones thrummed faintly, alive with a rhythm that pulsed through her palm. Not a curse, then, something physical, something feeding. She traced the widow's trail back to the village, her mind racing. The music didn't kill. It took voices, reshaped bodies, and left them hollow. But why? Elias played again that night, his silhouette stark against the bonfire's glow. Leta crept closer, hiding behind the smithy, her eyes fixed on the Bone Orchestra. Up close, it was grotesque yet beautiful, ribs curved into a frame, vertebrae strung like beads, a skull at its heart with hollow sockets that seemed to watch her. The bones glistened, not with polish but with a slickness that moved, faint tendrils of sinew twitching as Elias played. She saw it then, a ripple in the air, a shimmer that flowed from the villagers' swaying forms into the instrument. It wasn't just sound they gave, it was something deeper. She waited until dawn, when Elias slumped against the tavern wall, the orchestra cradled in his lap. The village slept, exhausted by the night's trance, and Leta approached, her knife hidden in her sleeve. "What is it?" she sighed, her hands sharp and deliberate. Elias flinched, his dark eyes darting to her face. He didn't sign back, but his lips moved slowly, letting her read them. "They're alive," he said. "I didn't make them. I found them." Leta's breath caught. She pointed to the orchestra, then to the forest. "They are taking people." "Why?" Elias hesitated, his fingers brushing the skull. "They feed on resonance, voices, breath, the hum of life. They were buried, forgotten, until I dug them up. I thought they'd make me rich." He laughed, a bitter twist of his mouth. "Now they own me. If I stop playing, they take me instead." Leta studied the bones, her mind piecing it together. A forgotten species, he'd said, something old, predatory, that thrived on human sound. She'd read tales in her grandmother's herbal journals of creatures lost to time, their remnants sealed beneath the earth. The black pine forest sat atop a barrow, a mound no one dared disturb. Until Elias. "What's waking?" she sighed, her hands trembling. He paled. "Something bigger. The more they feed, the stronger it gets. I feel it, under the village, stirring." That night, Leta didn't watch from her window. She gathered her tools, mandrake root to dull senses, iron filings to ground energy, a torch soaked in pitch, and trailed Elias as he played. The melody's vibration shook her ribs, stronger now, and she saw the ground ripple near the square, a faint crack splitting the dirt. The villagers swayed, oblivious, as little Kes, the weaver's girl, stumbled toward the forest. Leta let her go, she couldn't save them all tonight. She needed proof. In the forest, she found Kes, mute and twisted, her spine arched like a bow. Leta knelt, pressing her hand to the girl's chest. The thrumming was louder, sinking with a pulse from below, deep, slow, alive. She dug into the soil with her knife, uncovering a slab of stone etched with runes, its surface warm to the touch. The barrow. Whatever slept beneath it was stirring, fed by the bones' harvest. Back in the village, Elias played on, his face a mask of despair. Leta confronted him at dawn, her torch unlit but ready. "You're killing us," she sighed. "Stop, or I'll burn it." "You can't," he rasped. "They'll take me. You don't know what it's like, their voices in your head, demanding more." He gripped the orchestra, knuckles white. "I tried to destroy them once. They rebuilt themselves from my blood." Leta's resolve wavered. He wasn't a villain, just a fool caught in a trap. But the cracks in the square widened that day, and the air grew thick with a low, resonant hum she felt in her teeth. The bones weren't sated, they were ravenous, and the village was their feast. She spent the day grinding mandrake into a paste, mixing it with salt and ash. If fire wouldn't work, she'd starve them. At dusk, Elias lifted the bow, but Leta struck first. She hurled the paste onto the orchestra, coating the bones in a thick, muffling sludge. The vibration faltered, and Elias screamed, clutching his ears as blood trickled from them. The villagers froze, then collapsed, freed from the trance, but gasping. Leta grabbed the torch, lit it, and held it to the instrument. The paste hissed, the bones writhed, but they didn't burn, they shrank, curling inward like dying spiders. Elias fell to his knees, sobbing. "They are quiet," he whispered. "For now." Leta didn't trust it. She dragged the orchestra to the barrow, ignoring Elias's pleas, and buried it beneath the stone slab, piling earth and iron atop it. The hum faded, the cracks stilled, but as she walked back to Thornwick Hollow, she felt a tremor beneath her feet, faint, patient, waiting. The villagers recovered, their voices returning slowly, though Harrow and the others remained twisted, silent reminders of the cost. Elias vanished that night, leaving no trace but a blood-stained bowstring by the tavern. Leta kept watch, her herbs at the ready, knowing the bones might rise again, or something worse. She couldn't hear the threat, but she'd feel it. And when it came, she'd be ready, or she'd bury herself with it.